What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to share with you our very first experience flying with our baby. So for those of you who don't know, my husband coaches youth AAU basketball, so he travels to the US a lot for weekend tournaments. When he was heading to Washington, D.C. earlier this year, we decided to make a little getaway out of it. My husband actually has some really close family friends there as well, so we were able to stay with them. There was an option to drive to DC from where we are, which is Toronto, and that would have been approximately a 10-hour drive. But with the 10-month-old, we just figured she wouldn't be comfortable, and it just made more sense for us to fly. So seeing as to how it was our first time traveling with our baby on a flight, there was some anxiety in preparing for this. And by some anxiety, I mean a lot. So I'm going to share with you what that process was like for us, and hopefully it can help you with your first flight with your baby. And of course, the airline, Air Canada, ended up losing our luggage on the return trip. So I'm going to let you know how we had to deal with that. But more on that later. The first decision we needed to make was whether to purchase a ticket for our daughter or take advantage of the free flight. If you don't already know, airlines will allow toddlers under the age of 2 to fly for free. The only catch is that they have to sit on your lap for the duration of the flight. A quick Reddit search and you will find plenty of naysayers who voice their opinion that it's not safe for a toddler to be on your lap. It's better to buy them their own seat so you can strap them into their car seat. I will say that for us, though, it was the right choice. Toronto to DC is a quick flight. It was like an hour, and it really isn't worth it to buy her a seat. Honestly, maybe our thought process would have been different if it was a 15-hour flight to Hong Kong or a super long flight to Africa. However, let me know what you think. What would you do? Would you buy a seat for your baby or take advantage of your baby flying for free? Leave a comment below. I'd love to read it. On the topic of seating, that was the second thing we had to consider. A car seat. Our plan was to rent a car once we landed in DC, so we knew we would need a car seat for the week. The car seat we own right now is part of a travel system, meaning that the car seat or the bucket, it goes with the stroller, so you can click it into the stroller, take it out, and put it into your car. It's super convenient. My husband did a lot of research, and he found that you can check your stroller and car seat with the airline, but a lot of parents on Reddit had mentioned how luggage handlers aren't the most careful when it comes to handling their baby's gear. And when I say aren't the most careful, some luggage handlers aren't careful at all. They'll either damage the units or your units will get extremely dirty. So if you're like us, hygiene and cleanliness is really important. Plus, we didn't really want to risk having our primary form of transport for our baby here get damaged due to a week-long vacation. So the consideration at this point now was, do we buy a travel stroller, a cheap travel car seat, or rent a car seat from the car rental shop? I think we eliminated the last option immediately. There were just too many unknowns, and you know how it can be dealing with a car rental company. Plus, since we're really big on hygiene, we didn't really trust that the car seat rental would be cleaned properly. Like, how do we know a baby didn't have explosive diarrhea in it, and then the person that's supposed to clean it didn't just give it a quick once-over and then put it back on the shelf for the next person to use? So ultimately, we bit the bullet and we purchased a travel stroller, the Babyzen Yoyo. And we also bought a car seat travel bag so that we could bring our own car seat and check it at the gate. We bought the bag off of Amazon after going through user reviews. It wasn't too expensive, and honestly, it did the job. Our car seat fit into the bag easily with room to spare. We were able to throw a couple of our daughter's toys into the bag as well, books and anything that she might need. The bag was secured with a drawstring and a Velcro strap, and it also came with shoulder straps so that you could wear it like a backpack while walking through the airport. So that was super convenient. I will say that the bag with the car seat in it, it was very bulky, a little heavy and awkwardly shaped. So if you're a smaller person like me, it may be difficult for you to navigate that through the airport, and you may want to consider an alternative. Like I mentioned before, online forums talked about the risk of checking your baby gear, but the bag that we got held up and it did the job. As for our stroller, we wanted something that was compact. When traveling with the baby though, you definitely want to travel as light as possible. There are a few options out there in terms of travel strollers, though. They can range in price, and I would say you are paying for its compactability and the technology put into the design of the stroller. We had considered a few, but in the end, my husband decided on the Babyzen Yoyo because of its size. After doing his research, and I have to say he's the king of research, so I usually leave these things to him. So he did his due diligence and he felt comfortable with the information on the Yoyo that once it folded up, it would be able to fit into the airplane's overhead cabin compartment or under the seat. We didn't want to check the stroller, so this made it more ideal for us. The Yoyo wasn't the cheapest option, but we were able to find it on sale for a little over 400 Canadian. I will say that it was a worthwhile investment. I will probably do an in-depth review on the unit though at some point, but when you are traveling and visiting tourist sites where there may be a lot of people, having a smaller, sleek stroller definitely helps in navigating those large crowds. We were able to tuck it in under the seat during the flight, and because it comes with a shoulder strap once it's folded up, we were able to throw it over our shoulder and move with it through the airport, so it was really convenient. Figuring out this part of our trip, though, was the most challenging. Let me know what the most challenging part of your first flight with your baby was in the comments below. I'd love to hear your experience. On the day of the flight, we got there early, about 3 hours early, to make sure we would have enough time to check in. It was our first time flying with our baby. We wanted to be ready for any and everything. My husband always checks in online the night before, so that eliminated one lineup at the airport. We still had to check in some of our luggage, so we headed to the self-serve luggage check-in kiosks first. You can check in your luggage online, but for some reason, when we tried to do it, it was charging us for our baby's car seat. We just decided to go into the airport and do it there. The car seat for your baby should be a free check-in, so make sure you double check with that. Double check with the airline you're flying with before you pay for anything online. When we got to the airport to check the car seat, it was definitely free, so it saved us a few bucks. Once we had gotten everything checked in, it was now off to security. That is one benefit of flying with the baby. When you go through security and customs, they usually have a family priority line. So you actually bypass a lot of travelers and it can get you through to your gate much faster. I'd say our departure experience went pretty smoothly aside from our baby peeing through our diaper and her urine ended up leaking right through to my husband's brand new Arsenal jersey. He ended up having to change into one of those tourist t-shirts that they sell at the airports, a bright red one that said, "I love Canada" on it. And I just thought, of course, that's my husband, just letting everyone know where we're from, just screaming tourist. But it's honestly a good memory. Sometimes he wears it to bed and I look at it and I just have a chuckle to myself. Lesson learned, always pack yourself extra clothes in your carry-on. The flight itself was pretty short. We weren't concerned that our baby would get too fussy. It also was a morning flight, so we were up early and she was pretty tired by the time we boarded and took off. I always did worry though that I would have one of those babies who would cry nonstop on the flight and everyone would be annoyed. But that is what it is. Babies are just that. Babies. They don't have the ability to relay how they are feeling or what they are feeling to you, so they cry when they're uncomfortable. And you just can't worry about what others think if your baby cries. Of course, I don't want my baby to be the reason someone may have an unpleasant experience or an unpleasant flight, but at the same time, we have to live our lives. Any person who loses their cool due to a baby crying,
I had headphones on, I was sleeping. Why is the baby yelling?
They have their own internal issues that they need to deal with, and that is none of my business. Also, I just want to say, as long as you are doing everything in your power to console your crying baby, that is all that matters. I mean, it's another story if your baby is screaming at the top of her lungs and you're sitting there on your phone, scrolling TikTok, you're not engaging, you couldn't be bothered to tend to your crying baby. That's when I could see how passengers would be annoyed. That wasn't the case here, so I told myself that flights are public transportation, so anybody that has a problem with a crying baby should have flown private. Problem solved. Do your thing. Don't worry about other people. Once we landed in D.C., everything went pretty smoothly. My husband had been there numerous times before, so he was familiar with the process of retrieving our luggage and taking the shuttle over to the car rental hub. Once we got our rental, my husband had to secure our car seat and it was off to his family friend's place. They actually lived in the suburbs of D.C., so it was a roughly 50-minute drive from Dulles Airport. And did I mention that they lived in a mini mansion? because they did. And they were actually away that weekend, so we had the place to ourselves. So it was so nice. It was so generous of them to let us stay there, especially with our baby. It allowed our daughter the space to explore. And she was around 10 months old, so she was definitely in her exploration phase. So it just really worked out. At home here in Toronto, we live in a condo. There's not too much space for her on a daily basis to move around. But here, she was able to crawl all over the place. She had 8,000 square feet to go nuts, so it was great. A few challenges traveling with a baby, though. Of course, the sleeping arrangements. Unless you go somewhere where a crib is readily available, you'll most likely have to share a bed with your baby. I know for some new parents, this may be normal, but for my husband and I, we made it a rule to not have our baby sleep with us past the early stages of her life. Once we got her into her crib, she stayed in her crib. And lucky for us, she is a great sleeper. Make sure you check out my video on how we got our baby to sleep through the night. I will put a link for you down in the description, so please give that a watch. Once I would have our baby bathed, I'd put her down, maybe read her a book, and stay with her until she fell asleep. And then once she was fully asleep, I'd put pillows around her, turn on my baby camera, and then my husband and I would hang out for a little bit later since we were on a mini vacation, so to speak. Our week in D.C. with our baby was great. There wasn't too much that was different. Of course, having a home to stay in was a great benefit. We bought groceries and we were able to cook meals for her and for us. We actually don't feed her any prepackaged foods at the moment, so it was nice that we could stay with our routine. As I mentioned before, the Babyzen stroller was great for maneuvering through busy museums in DC. One of the cons, however, for the stroller were the wheels. They're quite small, so you can't go too fast with the stroller, and it's not the smoothest to push on uneven pavement, but it's not anything that we couldn't deal with. All in all, our family had a great week in DC. Once my husband's basketball team was finished with their tournament, we had a few days to explore on our own. Our baby had a blast and had her first out-of-country experience. Our trip home, however, was not as smooth as the rest of our trip, unfortunately. It started well, but it wasn't too soon after we got to our gate that things started to fall apart. The first thing we noticed was that there were a lot of people waiting at the gate. Apparently, a flight to Montreal, Canada, was delayed, so people were waiting for that plane to come in. We actually still had over an hour to go before our flight back to Toronto, so we ended up getting some food and we figured that we had time to lounge and change our baby before boarding. But as we finished changing her, we were called to the gate through the overhead PA system. Apparently our flight had come in early and they decided to board us first before the Montreal flight. Again, at the time, we thought nothing of it. It's weird thinking about it now. Back then, we were thinking it's always great if you can board early because then you could get home early. The nightmare began though once we landed and cleared customs. But first, it's like our baby knew what was in store for us once we got home to Toronto. She fussed the entire flight. Mind you, it was only an hour. It was enough to garner dirty looks, huffs and puffs and groans. But like I said, we were doing everything that we could to console her, to no avail. We just ignored the haters and we had to keep it moving. So now we're back in Toronto. As we were waiting for our luggage, we noticed there's no luggage. As the minutes turned into an hour and then the hour turned into another hour, more and more planes had arrived and passengers from those flights were able to get their luggage, and still no sight of luggage from our flight. To add to our frustration, there was no customer service support. No one had any answers. My husband had inquired about the status of our luggage, and all they would say was that it was in the back still getting sorted. Our flight deplaned on a tarmac, so my husband wondered if the luggage was still sitting there and just nobody had taken stock of it. But it wasn't until another passenger from our flight was able to check his AirTag that we realized that our luggage had actually gone to Montreal. I think our biggest frustration with all of this was that even when we all, like everybody on that flight, was communicating this information to the customer help desk, they still insisted that our luggage was in the back. It took another hour before they would acknowledge that our luggage was in fact in Montreal. By the time Air Canada did anything, it had been over 4 hours since we landed. My father-in-law was actually waiting outside at this time. He had come to pick us up, so he was just sitting there this entire time. And then we had to deal with our biggest dilemma, and that was how were we going to get our baby home because our car seat didn't make it. It was approaching 11 p.m. We were tired and she was tired. We were hungry and she was hungry. And after standing in a customer helpline for over an hour, we were told that our luggage would be shipped to us within 24 hours or we would receive some type of cash compensation. And then we were told to go to another department in the airport where they would give us a car seat so that we could get our baby home safely. So I guess the silver lining, if there is a silver lining here, was that we got a second car seat, which I use in my car now, but I would say it wasn't worth the hassle or the inconvenience that it caused us. All in all, I would say our first experience flying with our baby was a good one, aside from our trip home. We did end up getting our luggage. We got it back the next day. I would recommend taking advantage of the free ticket for your baby if you can. Of course, if it's a long flight, it may be more comfortable to buy an additional seat, but if finances are a consideration, flying before your baby turns 2 is something you should definitely take advantage of. If you made it to the end of my story, thank you so much for listening. If you have any horror stories or success stories flying with your baby, please drop it in the comments below. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, like the video, and all of that good stuff. I really do appreciate it. If this video has encouraged you to take a trip, safe travels, and enjoy. If you're watching this and you're on the fence, you're thinking, I don't know if I should do it. Should I travel with my baby? I'm here to tell you that you should. Just do it. You won't regret it. Thank you for watching this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.